Contacted Working Dogs for Conservation, and they are an outfit out of Bozeman, Montana, and they train dogs to find scat of animals. The dogs are only trained to find the scat and not to find the animal themselves. And you can learn an awful lot from the scat. So we thought this would be a really novel approach to finding out some more information about moose in the Adirondacks.
Having been a biologist for many years and using traditional methods of monitoring wildlife species, primarily large carnivores, was my field experience, became interested in the possibility of using dogs for non-invasive monitoring methods about 10, 12 years ago.
What we do is train dogs to work as detection dogs, similar to narcotics or explosives detection. And instead of those kinds of targets, we look for biological targets, usually wildlife scat.
With the recent advances in fecal DNA extraction and the real interest in non-invasive methods of monitoring different wildlife populations, we'd be able to get some of the same information that we might get from capture and handling those animals and putting radio collars out. We could get some of that information without ever seeing the animal by finding its scat. The dogs that we select for, generally, they're not what you think is a typical pet. In fact, the characteristics that they have are the absolute opposite of what might make a good pet. They can be incredibly difficult to live with because they're very focused, they're high drive. They can often, with the lack of focus and structure in their lives, become very destructive.
For our purposes, take this great energy and enthusiasm and willing to, go all day, and yes, I want that toy, and yes, I'm happy to work with you about it. It's the perfect stuff for us to work together. She does live in a home environment with me, similar to a lot of police officers who have their working canines. They have a lot of structure and boundaries that maintains the real working relationship.
These dogs are incredibly high energy and very challenging, and they need to be challenged mentally as well. They're very intense, they're object focused or obsessed. In fact, to the level that they'll be playing with a tennis ball and they really want to get a drink of water. They're not going to put the tennis ball down and go get a drink of water. They're going to put the tennis ball in the bowl with them so they can drink right next to it and then grab the ball again. So that object-driven intensity transfers to interaction with the handler, and that is the dog's reward for finding the scent source that it's trained to.
That said, she loves the work and working, and our relationship that we get to have. It's just phenomenal, and there's something there that doesn't exist between me and my pet dogs. There's just a real give and take. It's like a conversation that we have, and so there's something very special about that bond.
This is our first time working in the Adirondacks with dogs, and I think what's unique about it is the first time that we've used the dogs for a species other than carnivores, like deer, moose, elk, antelope. The steps that happen after we've decided that we are going to move forward with a particular project is getting samples of that species scat from that region. So what WCS did was go out and find moose scat for us. And it's very important to have samples from the region. Even though moose do occur in Montana, moose here in the Adirondacks are eating something completely different. The environment is different. There's many things that go into the scent picture that the dog has in its head, so to speak, of what that scent source that we're asking it to look for. So we didn't want to train them on Montana moose. We wanted it to be specific to this area so that they were well prepared when they got here to hit the ground running.
So once I've identified a dog like Wicket who is really interested in her toy and wants to do the work, how we turn that into a dog who's trained on scent is to use scent boxes to start out with. And that would be like 3 or 4 boxes with holes in the top, so they're just little boxes, but there's a dog nose size hole in the top of them, and we can set the boxes all pretty close together, and the dog can see the boxes and see the hole, and we put in one box the odor that we want the dog to learn. And then we direct the dog to that hole and say, check it, or sniff here, get the dog to sniff that hole. So she's sniffing it, I throw the toy out, she gets to play, and when we do that repetitively enough, she learns that that smell means that the toy comes out and she gets to play with it. And then once she's made that association, we start asking a little bit more of her, and like, how about now you sit when you smell that? And then we'll get a little harder from there and get rid of the boxes, so she no longer sees that there's boxes there to sniff, and she just has to turn her nose on without that little visual hint to sniff, and she'll start to sniff around, and we'll have the scat out for her to find, and she'll find it and sit and get the toy. And so that's just piece by piece, you add more like it's going to be in the real world.
And in the initial training, we make sure that the dogs understand certain commands and that they understand that being interested in wildlife, whether it's a chipmunk or whether it's a moose, that is not the focus. So we have commands like leave it, and we work through that in the early stages of training. We have excellent recall on all the dogs. So if they're too far, we often use language like too far, and the dog will turn around and head back towards us and then carry on. And the animals stay within sight. They're not just out there running through the forest. It's a very kind of give and take sort of dance that we do.
When Wicked is working, when she catches a whiff of odor from the scat, she needs to work in towards that odor. And the way she can work into it is that scent travels on the wind away from the scat out in a cone. It's like the scent particles get dispersed, and as they move farther and farther away from the scat, they get dispersed wider and wider. And depending on how strong the wind, that scent cone could be really narrow and skinny, and so the dog's going to turn into it, and it's almost going to look like she makes a straight line right into the scat, because it's just so windy that all the scent particles coming off of it are just moving quickly. But if there's not much of a wind, then the scent cone gets wider, and you can see a dog working off the edges of the scent cone. And what that means is that she recognizes she's in the scent cone, and she keeps moving that way towards where the scent's getting stronger until she steps out the side of it and goes, oh, it's not here anymore. So she has to turn back into it, and then she might hit the other edge of the scent cone and keep turning back into it. So she recognizes when she's in odor and when she's out of odor, and she turns her body so that she's staying in odor the whole time. And it just looks like this big squiggle right down to, here's the scent. And in her vest, she'll carry a GPS, and that will track satellites as we're going, so we can record a nice track for where the dog is. And the human team, which is myself as the handler and an assistant coming along to orienteer, is also carrying a GPS and will keep us on track of where we want to go for the days. We find the scat sample, and I give Wicked her toy and play with her and tell her she's a good girl and interact with her a little bit, and then the orienteer will pick that up where he's not touching it. He'll collect it so that we can send it to the lab uncontaminated, and they can analyze it for DNA and pull it apart for diet analysis. And he'll mark a waypoint on the GPS again, so we can add that back to the map of exactly where we were along our track when we found scats. And then I take the toy away and say, okay, let's go find more. And we head off, and hopefully, on a good day, do it all over again and again and again.
Dogs are not the answer for every species or a replacement for traditional monitoring techniques. They are another tool that biologists and managers can use. And we're very interested in the testing of the abilities and the limitations of dogs, and so that's where the science comes in. After working as a field biologist for the past 20 years and being out tracking animals and doing capture and handling and it's great to still be doing it, but in a different, non-invasive capacity.
When you see her work, you can just tell that she's happy to be out there and she loves it. And so not only, did she get a chance to be adopted, but not just adopted and put on a couch or expected to be, the mild dog that everyone wanted. She got to be adopted and, run with her energy and enthusiasm and actually turn that into a career that's really rewarding for her and for me.